America is built on top of decades of deeply rooted racism and has been ingrained into its DNA. To this day, it remains as pervasive as ever. From Donald Trump's infamous Build a Wall campaign to the paranoia around Muslims, it's clear that this issue is far from resolved. Now, literature, throughout history, has been used to shed light on certain issues. Newspapers deliver current events to readers. Authors share their views on the world. Now, you might be wondering what literature has to do with this problem of racism. Well, Uncle Tom's Cabin, an anti-slavery abolitionist novel aimed at exposing the cruelties and immoralities of slavery to the world, completely revolutionized U.S. thinking and history. It was one of the defining causes of the American Civil War, the war that ended slavery in America for good. It is no doubt a great piece of literature and demonstrates how one simple novel could change the entire world and redefine history. Even though slavery was abolished after the Civil War, life was still tough for African Americans, with things like lynching, segregation, unequal treatment, along with many other things. Hidden Figures, set almost a century after Uncle Tom's Cabin, demonstrates how history cannot be reversed, and its effects will carry on even 100 years later. Both stories aim to reveal America's dark past of oppression. Even though the central theme in both novels is inequality and racism in America, they both have different messages they want to spread. And today I'll be comparing these messages and determining which novel best spreads this message. Now, in Uncle Tom's Cabin, the main moral is that slavery is a moral evil. In these times, slaves weren't even people. They were livestock, servants, with inhumane punishments for those who opposed. They had absolutely no rights, and families were torn apart at auctions. Children auctioned away, never to be seen again, while their parents could do nothing but watch. Many slaves would risk their lives to run away to Canada via the Underground Railroad. The novel points out that slavery was incompatible with the Christian ideology of the time. How could one justify owning another person? Even though saying that they're acting in their slaves' best interest were lying, as that's extremely contradictory, as if they really were acting in their slaves' best interest, they wouldn't be slaves in the first place. The style of this novel is very emotional and sentimental, with a female protagonist with clearly understood motherly emotions that evoke several sympathetic responses. It attempts to make the reader understand and sympathize to the struggles that the slaves go through every day, and use emotions to turn people against slavery. Slavery was originally an issue of finances and money, but this novel turned slavery into an issue of ethics, for which this writing style was very effective in. One of the ways that this novel one of the ways this style is emphasized is through its characters. Uncle Tom goes through hardship after hardship after hardship until he is savagely beat to his death. But even through all of this, he remains resilient, tenacious, and devoted to Christianity, acting as an inspiration in the novel. Eliza is a dedicated mother who would do anything to protect her only remaining child, even risking her life to do so. She's the main pull that gets the reader emotionally invested inside the novel and the characters. In one scene, Uncle Tom attempts to comfort a slave woman whose child was just taken, sold, and shipped away, but finds it futile as nothing could comfort her. This reminds us that slaves are, according to the law, property and could be treated in any way. This provokes angry emotions in the reader as they learn about the separation between mother and child and how sometimes slaves are only treated as breeding animals. Now, Hidden Figures, on the other hand, focuses on the long-term effects of such injustice and cruel acts, as well as shedding light on the work African Americans did for NASA. Segregation was still in full effect, meaning that colored people had separate bathrooms, break rooms, and even seats on the bus. The story is set in NACA in 1943, where the key slogan was separate but equal. Now, NACA needed mathematicians to number crunch for their engineers, so they hired highly qualified female mathematicians regardless of color. But segregation laws were still in full effect, so colored people were treated differently with fewer opportunities, segregation, prejudice, among lots of other things. The main theme of this novel was that America was not actually acting in its self-interest by enforcing such laws, and the novel shows this effect in an international and national scale. In an international level, the book emphasizes that even though America was fighting overseas for freedom and equality, they refused to implement similar policies in their own country, demonstrating hypocrisy. Restaurants willingly served and waited on prisoners of war, but would not serve colored people for no reason other than the color of their skin. African Americans could also not achieve higher education by going to university, which only hampered the U.S. population by not allowing qualified candidates to achieve a greater state of mind and opportunities, as well as forcing them to work below their qualification and not allowing them to excel at more prestigious jobs, which would only benefit the country. On a national level, NACA was hampering itself by imposing segregation. Black computers were treated as second-class workers. While white females could live on campus, ride a special bus to work, and could go anywhere they pleased, black females had few privileges on top of being looked down on. Essentially, they weren't valued at all, and many obstacles were put in the way of these black computers, making them have to work twice as hard in order to achieve anything. And despite of all of this, the West Side, which is where all the black computers work, became essential to NACA. NACA was acting out of their self-interest by making it difficult for capable people to succeed, even though all it would do would benefit them. By preventing these qualified black candidates from achieving, it handicapped not only the corporation, but the entire nation. Now, both these books shed light on a topic in very different ways, and it's important to recognize that these two books were published in different times, with one being well over a century ago and one being in the modern era. While both books share a similar theme and are fantastic pieces of literature, I believe that Uncle Tom's Cabin achieves its goal of spreading the message better with its more emotional style, allowing the reader to better understand and sympathize with the situation and characters. With that being said, thanks for listening to my TED Talk. Have a good evening or good morning or whatever time it is when you watch it. Okay, bye.